Hello, it's Ed with Slow Car Fix, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about LS swaps. I've done 2 of them now. I've owned 3 LS swap vehicles, but I've done 2 of them myself. And I want to talk to you about the differences between the 2 of them, what it's like to live with each of them, and what I intend to do different for the next time. Another thing I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to take both the Malibu and my 57 Chev truck with their respective LS swaps and take you guys with me for a little drive, and I'll talk about them while I'm driving them and maybe beat on them a little bit, show you sort of what they can do, what they're like, and you guys can let me know what you think. Okay, so if you haven't followed my channel, please look at my other videos because I've got build series on each one of these cars. So the 2 cars that I've LS swapped is my 1981 Chevrolet Malibu, which was my first car, the first car I've ever owned. I've had it for 25 years. And I've LS swapped it with a Gen 4 5.3 liter with a cam and 4L80 trans. And I'll go into the details in a minute. But the other thing that I just completed was my 1957 Chev truck, which has a Gen 3 6 liter with a 4L80 trans. A lot of similarities, a little bit of difference in between the 2 builds. Different approaches. I learned some lessons along the way. It's kind of comparable because they both have similar power. Both cars have 373 gears. So the Malibu has a 10 bolt, 373 and posi, and the truck has a 12 bolt with a 373 posi. So the Malibu I did first. I did it a little differently. I bought an engine from a guy that all he does is prepare for LS swaps for people. So he buys wrecked vehicles, he goes through the engines, runs them on a run stand, builds a harness, runs them on a run stand, gives them a rough tune, and has it set up so you can pretty much drop it in, plug and play. On the truck, I took a different approach because I had a little bit of experience on it now. I bought a running engine and trans out of a 2005 or 6 Chev 2500 HT truck. Both are truck engines. I drove the truck that the 6 liter was in, and the 5.3, I got to see it run on the run stand. So I saw both of them run before I bought them. So that's the first step that I would say that I will make sure going forward that I will do is I will buy an engine that I've seen run, and I will buy as complete as possible. All the accessories, the harness, everything. The one that I got for the truck, they had cut the exhaust just where the catalytic converters meet the downpipe from the exhaust manifolds. So they had scrapped the cats, but I got a piece of pipe that has the O2 bung in it, and I got the stock manifolds. 5.3 in the Malibu, I didn't get that stuff. What I did get was a set of Amazon or cheapy kind of headers that had the bungs in them for the O2 sensors. And I'll talk a little bit about which I prefer out of the 2 of those setups. Just for context, the Malibu, I have probably 10,000 kilometers on it now. I'm in Canada. On the build, I drove it to the East Coast and back last year with my wife, and we had a great time with it. It was reliable. It got about on average between 9.6 and 9.8 liters per 100 kilometers. So if you're in the States, you're gonna have to calculate that, but I think it's roughly around 30 miles to the gallon off the top of my head. But on average between 9.6, 9.8 liters per 100 kilometers. And that was with a fully loaded car, my wife, my dog, traveling on the highway speeds, not really going easy on it, but not kicking the crap out of it either. The truck, on the other hand, is a relatively fresh build. The truck I just finished It is June right now, and I finished it maybe in end of March, beginning of April, something like that. I've got maybe 1,500 kilometers on it, several tanks of fuel through it. I don't really know how it is for economy. I know it's significantly better than the 350 that was in it before, of course. And my personal opinion is going forward, I won't be doing small block Chevy stuff anymore. I'll be sticking with LS's because they're working well for me. So the fuel system on each car. So the 81 Malibu, what I did for the fuel system on it was I did the Grand National tank, because a Grand National is the same exact gas tank, but it's a fuel injected version. So it has a baffle in it for the fuel pump, so for an in-tank fuel pump, and I did an in-tank fuel pump. So the first recommendation would be is if you are going with a vehicle that did have an option of fuel injection, buy the fuel injected version of the tank and use that rather than some sort of aftermarket tank. So I was fortunate I was able to do that, and I used the Corvette style fuel pressure regulator, and I used an Aeromotive Stealth fuel pump. On the 57 truck, it was a totally different deal. The original tank was behind the seat in the cab, didn't hold a lot of fuel, and there's other problems with it being in the cab with smell and venting and stuff like that. Although I would argue that that's probably the safest place for it to be, because it's in with the occupants and it's not where it's going to get hit. It's a whole nother conversation. So I moved the tank out between the frame rails, just in front of where the back bumper would be in front of the trailer hitch. I bought a tank from Tanks Inc. I went with a Walboro fuel pump, electric in-tank fuel pump, and I went with a Corvette style regulator, and I went with a universal style sender. So for cooling, always a big concern when you're swapping an engine into a vehicle, and I don't consider myself really a performance guy. I'm more of a road trip kind of guy, road tour kind of guy. So I'm concerned with how it's going to deal in traffic, how it's going to deal on the highway. Am I going to have any issues that I'm not going to want to live with it? So on the Malibu, I went with an F-body radiator. Problem with that is I had to modify my lower rad support, section it out and section the rad in. I think some people have done that differently, but that's what worked for me. So I went with an F-body radiator, and I went with 2 electric fans. On the 57 truck, it has a custom radiator that's built for the truck. It has 1 large electric fan, and the problem with that is that's a more expensive option. A custom radiator is a lot more expensive than just buying a radiator that came out of something else, even if it is brand new. The interesting thing is that now with Summit Racing and all these other places, if you are really handy with measuring and can picture, maybe even make a cardboard template of what your radiator should look like, what you would like it to look like, where you would like your ports, you can go on Summit and give them the dimensions and pretty much find whatever radiator you want. The truck already had a custom radiator for the 350 Chevy. Unfortunately, I was able to adapt that. Now to talk about engine mounts. Both I used the stock small block Chevy clamshell style engine mounts. So on the Malibu, I built my own because I didn't have any. On the truck, I had some off the small block Chevy. To save time, either buy aftermarket Holly ones, or going forward, I'll just use small block Chevy ones. Building my own took a bunch of time. It wasn't hard, but it took a lot of time. I used ICT billet engine relocation brackets or mounts. They make it so your LS engine mount will bolt where your LS engine mount would bolt to the engine, now bolts to the small block Chevy clamshell. So they're not expensive and they're fantastic. I would use them again. That is something I would use again for sure. Both are drive-by-wire. Personally, that's my preference. When I found out that you could do such a thing, I thought, that's exactly what I'm gonna do, because I don't have to screw around with linkage and cables and whatever other kind of crap that interference from the cables, running a cable through the firewall, all this kind of stuff. To me, it's a personal preference, but it's a lot easier to just run the wires for the plug. So the harnesses, both harnesses are stock GM harnesses that have been pared down. What I mean by pared down is that all the extra crap that we don't need, like brake sensors, airbag stuff, whatever else would be in the harness. I don't know what's all in the stock harness, but all this crap that's in stock harness, emissions controls that we don't need for our older vehicles, they're all gone. All that stuff is gone. It's all simplified, streamlined. I did two different approaches on this. The Malibu, because I bought it from a guy that's what he does and prep stuff, the engine had the harness on it already, and it was already installed, and I didn't have to go through the process of sorting that. On the 57 truck with the Gen 3 6-liter, I got the stock harness with the engine, and I had to take it to a guy and have him modify it. And you can modify it yourself if you want to go down that road. It's not overly complicated from what I can see, but for me, with the time savings, I could drop the harness to the guy, have him work on it while I'm working on something else on the truck, and it made the whole project go faster, and there was less guesswork because he's done it hundreds of times. With exhaust. Now, the Malibu didn't have exhaust on it, so that was meant it was going to be going to the exhaust shop anyways. Both had to go to the exhaust shop. The truck had custom dual exhaust for the 350 that was in it. The difference between the two of them is that with the Malibu, I went with headers, and with the truck, I went with manifolds. So I've come to not like headers. I find that they don't seal very well unless you get really top shelf, high-end headers, and not that either one of my builds were budget builds. I didn't really want to allocate the money towards headers when I don't really care. Not really into top-notch performance stuff or anything like that. So the headers on the Malibu, I find them noisy. I find they tick. I've tried different gasket setups. I've tried different collector gaskets. We've tried a lot of different things. Really, the end result is that they're just kind of noisy. I don't really like that. It's not my preference. So what I did on the truck, the stock LS manifolds are cast steel, not cast iron. So you can cut the flange off the end and reshape it, move it around whatever way you want, reorient it, reclock it, and adapt it to your use case, to your vehicle. Personally, I will do that again because they are quiet. There's not the horsepower difference. It's negligible. You're already jamming way more power into the vehicle than it ever had before, at least in my case. So personally, if I was to do it again, I would get the manifolds with the engine, and I would just redo them, clean them up, reclock them, whatever you have to do. By reclock, I mean cut off the flange on the collector and reorient it to get around whatever obstructions you have. That's what I did. Now gauges, that's an expensive part. It can be really expensive or it can be not as expensive, but either way it's expensive. If you want to have your speedometer working, it's fiddly. It's fiddly and kind of a pain. That's one downfall of doing LS swaps. The easiest option is what I did in my 57 truck. My 57 truck, there's a Dakota digital gauge set that's available for it that plugs into the, you can buy the adapter that plugs into the OBD port. Everything reads on the gauge set. So it's a multi-gauge. It's got your speedometer through your vehicle speed sensor, has your tachometer, has your battery gauge, your oil pressure, your temperature gauge, has set points, has quarter mile times, has 0 to 60 times, has all this other stuff that I'll probably never use. You can change the colors of the screen, you can change the backlighting, you can choose whatever you want. Mine reads in both miles per hour and kilometers per hour, so that's really handy. It was expensive. It was relatively easy to install, but it was expensive. So you have to factor that in. It's easy to say that you can do an LS swap and buy an engine for $500 or something, and maybe you can, but wasn't the case for me. And the swap itself was far more expensive than the engine and transmission. On the Malibu, what I did was I wanted to utilize my stock gauges, and I had some aftermarket gauges already. So I bought a Speed Hut Speed Box, which is essentially a little box that takes a VSS or GPS signal, and it has a motor in it that drives your speedometer cable, which drives your factory gauges. It's a lot of screwing around, and you have to find a spot for this little box. It was also not cheap. So hindsight, I probably would have did that different. Next time I will do it different, and I will stick to the way the truck was, because the time I saved was quite a bit of time. The other thing that I did was, on the Malibu, was I went with a mechanical oil pressure gauge, which meant I had to buy fittings to go from imperial to metric for the odometer gauge. The engine is metric and the gauge is imperial, and I had to run a line to the gauge to get an oil pressure reading. Wasn't that hard, but it was fiddly to get the right size fittings and to figure all that out. Just required more homework. Same thing with the temperature gauge. It's an electric temperature gauge, and I had to put a temperature fitting into the cylinder head, metric, with an adapter to imperial to run the wire from the odometer to the, or from the sensor to the odometer gauge. This was far easier on the Dakota digital stuff because I just plugged into the OBD port and all was there. For accessories, both vehicles are running the same accessory setup. The Malibu has a smaller alternator because the Malibu, the issue with it was hood clearance. I could not run an intake manifold cover on it because I don't have clearance. But I do have a smaller alternator on the Malibu just to gain a little bit of clearance. I also have air conditioning compressor delete on both, so it's just not there, and I went with a shorter belt, and I used a Dorman pulley, which is a little plastic pulley on the power steering pump. It's a little smaller diameter than the stock pulley to give me clearance from the steering box, because the steering box on the Malibu is a very tight fit. There's only 3/8 of an inch. I have much more room on the Camaro steering box that's in the 57 truck, but it's still relatively tight, and the pulley did make a difference. So stock accessories with the Dorman pulley on the power steering pump, and I'll put the part number for that Dorman pulley in the description of this video. Now, the Malibu, being a Gen 4, presents its own set of problems. The Gen 4 engine, it's a 5.3, this particular one, it's all aluminum. But the problem with it is they come with variable valve timing, and they come with displacement on demand. So that's the 4 to 8 cylinder thing. If you're in like eco mode, you let off the gas and it runs on 4 cylinders, and it has variable valve timing, both of which I didn't want. So to eliminate them, you're pretty much, now I don't know the ins and outs of it, but you're pretty much well into the valve train. And at the point that I got with it was, well, we might as well put a cam in. So I put an aftermarket cam in. It sounds cool at idle. It's lumpy. It sounds great. I thought it would be a wonderful idea. However, it does tend, I have a stock torque converter, so it does tend to push the car a little bit with the brakes on. It could use a stall converter. And this is I'll put a link in the description, or a part number in the description for the cam, but it's like a Summit cam, and it's just a generic middle of the road cam, probably the smallest one that you could get away with, smallest lift and duration with a stock torque converter. So the engine's kind of done up a little bit, but really I don't notice that much of a difference other than the sound at idle. The 6-liter Gen 3 in the 57 truck doesn't have any of those problems because it never came with variable valve timing. It never came with displacement on demand. I didn't change the cam. I didn't open the engine. I didn't do anything on that engine. It is bone stock. Okay, so now that we've talked about the difference between the Gen 3 and Gen 4 in regards to the variable valve timing and the displacement on demand, and upgrading the camshaft, this puts a spin on things. So when you change the camshaft and you take the engine out of the parameters of its original intent, you really need to get it tuned. Now you have to get them both tuned because you have to get the I'm not going to get into the details of the tune because I don't know enough to talk about it, but you have to get the emissions stuff taken off of it. You have to get it adjusted for your use case, how it's set up, how the engine is now. So, and from what I was told, even the location of the MAF, the mass airflow sensor, can change the parameters of the tune. So if you are doing something like what I did with the Malibu, where you're putting a cam in it and you're deleting the variable valve timing, and you've got headers now, and you've got all this stuff, and you've got an open air intake, and you've got your mass airflows in a different spot, and everything's different than it was originally intended, and you also want to get some jam out of it and get some performance, pretty much go into the dyno tune. Now, a lot of people will do what they call a road tune, where they take it for a drive, or somebody's driving and they've got the laptop on their lap and they're doing like a real world tune. I've heard that's good. I don't know. The dyno tune seemed to be the thing to do for me, so that's what I did on the Malibu. It was an experience. It was interesting. I've never had a car tuned like that before. It definitely made me stomach sick when my fresh build was going and getting raped on the dyno. They were careful and they knew what they were doing and all that stuff, but it was still a little uncomfortable knowing the time that you have in it and everything else, to see somebody immediately kicking the crap out of it. The stock engine. If you go with a stock engine like I did with my Gen 3 in the truck, my guy that built the harness has done a lot of these and has dyno tuned them in the past, and he has a program for the stock tune that, for the stock engine, that improves the performance, improves the shift points, improves everything. Eliminates the emissions stuff that I'm not utilizing and all that. And he had that. That was part of the deal. When I dropped the harness and computer off to get built, he did the built the harness for me, and he tuned the computer, and I put it in, and I didn't have to take it for a dyno tune. It just worked. That's handy. It's really handy. It learns a lot from the O2 sensors as well, so it will, you know, fine tune itself for altitude and all those things. But quite handy to not have to go to the dyno. It saved me, you know, a day, and the cost of the dyno and the cost of taking the car on a trailer to the dyno and all that sort of thing. So that's an advantage of a stock engine. Now, the other thing is, when I spoke to the gentleman who did my harness, he said, if I'm going to upgrade my camshaft later, or if I had an upgraded camshaft, to talk to him first. And what he would do is he would give me a cam profile that he already has. Like, he would say, go buy this cam because I already have a tune for that cam. So that would have been fortunate. If I wanted to go with the lumpy camshaft in the 6-liter, I could have, and still had it pre-tuned. Now, I know I'm referencing this one individual that I used. However, and I'll put his link in the description too. He's Gerb Shop, and he's out of Port Perry, Ontario, and he was really good. He mails stuff all over the place. He'll send stuff to the States. It's great. But I talked to 2 or 3 different people that make harnesses, and they all have the same sort of thing. So they all have a stock of files, tune files, for different engines that they've collected over the years. So you can find someone local to you that likely already has a tune file if you're leaving your engine stock, or if you talk to them ahead of time and find out what they have tune files for, you can modify your engine accordingly. It could save you like $1,000 on a tune, plus a day's time, right? So that's helpful. Going forward, I don't really care about the lumpy camshaft at idle. I prefer it with the stock camshaft. So I think going forward, I'll just use a stock engine. So pros and cons, I guess. Since we're getting into that, the cons of the Gen 4, the variable valve timing, displacement on demand. When I upgraded the cam, I'm borderline of needing a stall converter. I had to tune it on the dyno, but it is a newer engine. It's 10 years newer than the engine that's in the 57 truck. And when they were doing the cam, the heads came off, new head gaskets, the whole engine was resealed other than the crank seal. So that's kind of nice. So on the 6-liter, the cons are that it's an older engine. It's 10 years older than the engine that's in the Malibu. It's harder on fuel. Now, I'm only assuming that. The truck is quite a bit lighter than the Malibu. So really, they should be similar on fuel, with the Malibu being upgraded, but the 6-liters are known to be hard on fuel. They're still gonna be miles better than a small block Chevy. From what I understand is that the 4L60 trans is less restrictive, will allow more power, and therefore doesn't use as much fuel. However, the 4L60 trans are not known for their reliability and not known for handling performance improvements and that sort of thing. So mine both have 4L80 trans. Going forward, I have to think about going forward because I'm starting to collect parts, I'm continuing to collect parts for my 55 Chevy, as it's going to be a pretty serious project again in the winter. Going forward, I'll probably go with a 6-liter, a Gen 3. For simplicity, I like the torque. I don't have to do any upgrades. I don't need any upgrades. It's got lots of power. I will go with either 4L80 trans or an AR5 5-speed manual trans. If I could find the 6-speed manual for a reasonable price, I would probably go with that, but I think they're pretty dear, and that might not work for me, and I don't know that I care whether it has 5 gears or 6. I will go with manifolds. I will go with exhaust manifolds instead of headers, and I will do that trick again because that worked really well. I will go with either Dakota or another one-piece dash unit that covers all the engine gauges and all the engine management stuff in the one unit that plugs into the OBD port. I will use the same, it's the same fuel system on both, where I have the in-tank pump and I have the Corvette fuel pressure regulator, and I'll probably just go with the Walbro pump that I have in the 57 truck because I have heard that it's more reliable, although I haven't had any issues with the Aeromotive Stealth. They're both the same noise, they both do the same thing, they both pump out the same fuel pressure. I will do drive-by-wire again. The next time I do for cooling, what I'll do is I will go with a radiator. I will modify the vehicle to accept a radiator that's from a stock application from another vehicle. So I will either modify the vehicle to accept the truck radiator that came with the engine, or an F-body radiator, something like that, that I can go to any of the local automotive stores and just buy one. I don't have to screw around with, if my radiator starts leaking or something, trying to go to a custom shop to have a radiator fixed or repaired or made. Okay, so I guess we'll take them for a ride. See what that's like. I'll put my headset thing on and take them for a ride. Maybe I'll talk about each one while I'm driving it. See what that's like. Okay, so the best part about an LS swap is that right there. Now, don't pay attention to my gauge because my oil pressure sender is gone. I have to replace it. It's very common on these 6 liters. And so sometimes my oil pressure will go to 0. I can assure you I don't have 0 oil pressure. So this is the 57 truck. Gen 3 6 liter stock with a tune, 4L80 trans. Let's take it for a spin. So you'll notice that this one, it idles smoother. It's kind of quieter. It seems quieter, but that's just the manifolds, I think. The exhaust itself is louder. The drive-by-wire pedal is there. It's very responsive, but you'll see that it just kind of idle. Like, I don't have to put effort on the brake to hold it like I do on the Malibu from that camshaft. So it's very responsive, lots of power. See, it's already warmed up because I had this out already. But it's just smooth. Shifts crisp whenever it'll shift. So then from 50 kilometers an hour, it jumps pretty good. Okay, so I'm in my 81 Malibu with the Gen 4 5.3 liter with cam and all that kind of stuff. No Dakota digital gauge in this, just a stock gauge with a Speed Hut speed box that drives it. Odometer, oil pressure and temperature gauge, B&M ratchet shifter. You hear it, it's got a little bit of a lumpier idle. So I haven't had this one out, so I'm gonna have to take it down the road and warm it up a little bit. and then I'll do the same sort of thing so you can see what that's all about. I can hear that header tick now, and I can't really describe it, and there's not any leak from the header gaskets or the collectors. It's just, you know, like a ticking noise that's there all the time. And they are cheap headers, but like I said, I'll just wait for the temperature to come up a little bit. But still effortless to drive, you know, just no fiddling around and two-footing or anything like that. So my temperature has come up a little bit just from a rolling stop. I don't know, maybe this one does have more jam. Kind of feels like it's got more jam. It's really hard to say. This one's got more, it's like it's got more pull at the top end, and the truck has more torque, which makes sense because the 6-liter is supposed to have more torque. So I'll just slow down to like 50k like I did with the truck. 50k-ish. Maybe I'll wait till I get straight here. So 50k-ish, and I'll punch it. Okay, this definitely has more top end than the truck. I didn't think so, but I think it does. Both of them, the temperature is about the same. Like it's reading 180 here, it's reading 180 or so on my on the truck, and like I said, it's just effortless. You just drive it. You don't have to worry about it. Pretty good on fuel. Tons of power for what I need. Like this is more than enough. You know, and then you set the cruise control. Drive it anywhere. I drove this thing on an 8,000 kilometer road trip last year. It was just beautiful. The truck does do better burnouts. Now the truck is way lighter, and the truck has smaller tires. This has big fat 275 60 15 tires on it, so it doesn't light them up like the truck does. It does get a little squirrely, but it's not crazy. But you see, like it's not off the line there. It doesn't pull like the truck does. The truck just goes right off the line, where this is more of a rolling. This does shift a little crisper, but that's on the tune. And I could get the guy that tuned my my truck, that provided the tune on the truck, to crispen up my shifts on that thing. But I don't really need it. This is kind of fun that way, but it's kind of nice to not have it do that as well. Especially when I'm getting ready to take the truck on a road trip. So curious to see what you guys think, and what if you guys have done any LS swaps, what you guys are running. Now the reason I don't really care about performance that much with these old cars is that stupid thing right there, my daily car that I drive to work every day. It's a fantastic little car, but that Tesla is faster than any old car that I'm ever gonna have. So it's pointless to try and chase what modern cars can do these days as far as power from an old car. It's just silly. These are really good for what they are. They make good noises, and you're utilizing your old car for modern everyday driving, which is kind of nice. but which the LS makes a huge difference for. I've had some really good luck with 350 Chevys. I've had a lot of them. I've had a lot of them in this car. I've had a couple of them in that truck and other cars I've had. But these LSs, they just seem to be really reliable, really good power, relatively simple, and just a pleasure to drive. It's just like driving a new truck for power-wise. For my use case, for my road trips and stuff, it really works for me. Okay, everyone, that's it. Thanks for watching. Check out my other videos. There's a whole pile of videos. I think there's like 30 on the Malibu project and maybe like another 20 or something on the 57 truck, on all the things I did, every single little detail, all the different parts I used. I've documented it all for myself and for you guys on this YouTube channel here. Please consider subscribing and like, comment, let me know what you guys think. I really appreciate all the support, and I really appreciate all the positive comments. It's great to have you guys following along with the things I'm screwing with and doing every day. Thanks.